Happy holidays! Welcome to Discograffiti's very first holiday Patreon membership drive, which will be running through the month of December. Whether you've been sitting idly on the cliff's edge waiting for a gentle push from yours truly, or you're brand new to the show, 'tis the season to either sign up for Discograffiti's Patreon once and for all, or to upgrade your membership. And here's why. At the lieutenant or major tier, in addition to 3 or 4 shows a week, access to the gigantic archive of Patreon back episodes, and your backstage pass, through the month of December only, you'll also get the following. An onboarding call with me during which you'll tell me all your ideas on how to make the podcast you'd like to hear. And whether I use all, some, or none of your ideas, I'll have listened closely and most importantly gotten to know you. Plus, 3 months into your membership, you'll be eligible to appear on the Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound podcast. That's right, an entire episode all about you, your band, your band's album, your band's tour, or whatever other cool stuff you might be up to. And not only do we make the episode, we promote it for you too. Last but not least, you'll receive a completely free digital copy of Metal Machine Muzak, which otherwise costs $11. Metal Machine Muzak is Discograffiti's double album Lou Reed tribute featuring 16-minute pieces by Lou Barlow from Sebadoh and Dino Jr., Corey Hansen from Wand, Mark Robinson from Unrest, and W. Cullen Hart from Olivia Tremor Control. Please tell all your music obsessive friends about our holiday Patreon membership drive. In fact, if your friends do sign up, be sure to email me at info@discograffiti.com and let me know who they are, because I'll be sending you an additional surprise gift on top of everything else as a token of my gratitude. And now, without further ado, the greatest music commentary podcast in all the land, I bring you Discograffiti.
Bill was part of my identity. My friendships is a really big part of my musical life. And he was a part of my identity, and I lost that as a musician. And I only identified as a mathematician suddenly, having gone into graduate school. And it took some years, maybe up until just a few years ago, that I started to kind of remember myself as a musician and remember my passion.
How long between his passing and you identifying as a mathematician?
Instantly. That day,
oh, really?
I think I started graduate school the same day that I found out he passed away. I had to go into school that day.
Welcome to Discograffiti, the Music Obsessives podcast that gives freaks like you and me the chance to connect with the brotherhood obsessed with rating the entire discography of every single artist and band that ever mattered. I'm your host, Dave Gebrow, and with 4 new episodes each week, you're going to gain a comprehensive knowledge of an act's history and output in the time it takes to listen to one album. Each new guest swings a hard left into an area you either had no idea you needed to know about or know all about and can't believe you're not alone out there. And in this episode, we'll be turning our spray cans on Robert Schneider, along with our special guest, Robert Schneider. Here's just some of the many things Robert and I touch on in this podcast. The superfluousness of LSD to the middle-aged brain, the levels of fulfillment Robert gets from music versus math at this point in his life, the background origin story of the Elephant Six Enthusiasts Facebook group, how his musical path will likely look just around the bend, the massive impact Bill Doss's death had on his identity, and Robert's favorite Apples in Stereo LP. Before we kick things off, a quick word from Robert.
Hey friends in Discograffitiville, this is Robert Schneider from the Apples in Stereo and the Elephant Six Recording Company. Like all musicians, I've kicked off a parallel career in mathematics. If I had to pick just one equation, my favorite equation would be U plus Discograffiti's Patreon equals pure ecstasy. I'd classify every moment of my Strawberry Alarm Clock Summit with Dave as essential listening. Plus, Dave is foolishly attempting to support a family by releasing 4 episodes a week on Patreon. So if you believe in karma, in late 60s psych pop, and if you believe in non-stop binge listening for music obsessives like I do, then head to patreon.com/discograffiti and subscribe. Thanks.
The director's cut's got a bunch of additional goodies embedded within it for your auditory pleasure, and you can find it in our Patreon shop for mere pennies at patreon.com/discograffiti/shop. Or better yet, just subscribe for access to the complete versions of all our shows. I recommend the Lieutenant tier at the very least, so you can access those director's cuts, but the major tier is what you want if you want it all, including for you true music lovers out there, a guest-packed cornucopia of off-the-beaten-path episodes, and the more obscure the better. Even if you're on the fence, just head over there because it's finally free to become a basic member. Coming up, we've got a career-spanning interview with the Beatles' Pete Best and a massive, many-guested launch into the Beach Boys' entire catalog. So don't miss out. Open up your listening app right now and subscribe. And away we go then. Welcome to Discograffiti. Robert Schneider and I finished talking about the Strawberry Alarm Clock. I don't know about you, but I'm tingling as if I had taken acid about 40 minutes ago, and there is like starshine on the periphery of my vision, that sort of pre-trip excitement, which I haven't felt for a good 3 decades.
Whoa, David.
Yeah.
Are you telling me you didn't take the acid? Because I'm 40 minutes down the road now. No, I'm just joking with you. Friends, we're not on acid today.
No, but I got to ask you, do you think if you took LSD today, knowing your brain and the way it operates currently as a middle-aged iteration of yourself, would you have a good or bad trip?
Gosh, it's been some years. So much has happened in my life, and my life has gained so much depth and complexity that on the one hand, I could appreciate so much more, but on the other hand, I have so much more like anxiety. So I don't know. I really don't. It's hard for me to say. I'm certainly not opposed to trying though, but I also would be very careful about it.
By the way, you can ask me anything. I don't think it's not just going to be me asking you questions. It's your turn. You can ask me anything. I don't care what it is.
How about you? I will say that it's been a long time since I've taken LSD. I took it during a period that I was making very psychedelic music, and it really meant a lot to me for helping me sort of understand myself. At the same time, there got to be a point that it was like kind of like just to do it again would have been just like having fun, and that's not what something that strong is for. I don't believe. I mean, look, everybody has their own opinion about things, but my feeling is that you should never do anything that's dangerous in your life. You owe it to yourself to protect yourself, and so I think that when you're dealing with stuff like this, I think that it's the sort of thing that one needs to be cautious. And so I was a young person, and it got to be a time that I felt like maybe I had done it enough. It wasn't that it had damaged me or anything like that. It wasn't that, and I had never had a bad experience with it. It was just like, why? Right. I couldn't justify it to myself anymore. I had done it for this sort of this spiritual Timothy Leary kind of enlightenment. And the fact is that I had reached that kind of feeling without LSD before, right? And I have had it since. So but at the same time, you also can get that kind of feeling. It's possible to get it while you're tripping. It's also possible to freak yourself out really bad.
The answer to your query is there's no question, I think, I would have a bad trip. Now, during the pandemic, when I'd kind of gone rogue from being in the program because of the pain from my surgeries, I'm
so sorry for you, David. I'm so sorry for your pain.
I deserve your pity. I deserve your unending pity. Thank you. I did experiment with microdosing, and I wasn't really interested in a full-on trip, but I did push the microdosing to the point at which I was kind of borderline not comfortable anymore because it was, a little bit more intense than what it was, meant for microdosing-wise. And I can tell you, I know with the level of anxiety that I have and the way that my life has changed and circumstances that I would unquestionably have a bad trip. I feel like it's preordained. And the last time I did do LSD, which was November of 1998, I did have a bad trip. And I had had bad trips before, but I knew that if I got out of that one unscathed, or even if I got out of it scathed, I still was going to stop. That was it.
Yes.
I knew
that sounds like you had found the right time too.
Yeah.
I was lucky that I had always positive experiences, and looking back on it, I feel like it was a beautiful thing for me. At the same time, I'm very cautious to the listeners listener that it's not the same as smoking weed. It's a different thing, and it lasts a long time. So once
It's
you're
a game
into it,
changer.
you're stuck on it for 10 hours.
Right.
That's the problem with it. It's not like doing something that's just an hour to 4 hours.
It's the problem with it, and it's the best thing about it.
That's right. It's the best thing about it if you're on the right journey.
Yeah.
And I was lucky to always be on a good journey during it. Another thing, it's been decades since I even have been in. I wouldn't even know where to get it in my current. I was a psychedelic underground musician. Like it was in my community. It was easy to get when I was young.
Because you're Robert Schneider, you could have it by the end of the day, probably, if you wanted to.
Thank you for thinking that I have that kind of pull in the
know
illicit
where to
drug
find
scene.
it?
However, I assure you that I probably don't.
Listen to me. If you went up right now and posted on the Elephant Six enthusiast page that you're interested in getting back into psychedelic experimentation, there'd be such a flood of responses, Facebook would shut down.
I would never want to stimulate that kind of a breakdown of the internet.
Only Three Lads is a fun, lively podcast hosted by indie musician and nerd Brett Vargo and radio personality Uncle Greg, with a variety of third lads guesting. The show celebrates all facets of alternative music from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, from punk and new wave to power pop, synth pop, Brit pop, indie, and more. While Only Three Lads is partially an interview show, it's more about music fans coming together, with each episode focusing on a different top 5 discussion topic. For example, top 5 Motown-influenced songs, top 5 Saturday night albums, and top 5 songs of 1978. Only Three Lads is charted among the top music commentary podcasts in over 60 countries around the globe, and has been named as one of the top 15 alternative music podcasts you must hear by FeedSpot for 4 years in a row. To date, they've showcased an awesome roster of musicians, writers, filmmakers, comedians, photographers, and fellow podcasters who've shaped and or been shaped by the music we love. Among them, Graham Parker, Robin Hitchcock, Jeff Murphy from Shoes, Mickey Berenier from Lush, The Primitives, The Darling Buds, Heavenly, David Gedge of The Wedding Present, Robert Vickers from The Go-Betweens, Steve Wynn from The Dream Syndicate, Tony Valentino from The Standells, Vanessa Briscoe-Hay from Pylon, Love Tractor, Hugo Burnham from Gang of Four, Twin Tone Records' Peter Jesperson, the manager of The Replacements, Ira Robbins from Trouser Press, and many, many more. Join the Only Three Lads community on Facebook, Instagram, X, or Blue Sky, and let them know that Discograffiti sent you. And if I may, Brett and Greg are a couple of great guys that work their asses off on their show, and it shows. I love the kinds of guests that they get. These guys go to the mat for what they believe in and what they say, and I really love them for it. You should definitely check Only Three Lads out. In the dead of night, when you're tossing and turning, I'm curious if your current iteration as Robert Schneider, the mathematical work that you do, if it's giving you the same kind of spirit-quelling life satisfaction that your music did, is it scratching the same itches and giving you the same kind of love and infusing your spirit in the same way?
Okay, so I can say yes. Yes, for sure, in the creative sense. But there's a lot more to music than the creative part. It's a very social thing. And the math is different in that way. It's also social, but it's different. So I can speak to what you're asking.
I want to know, were you forced to look for work outside of music because it wasn't paying the bills? And if you were...
No, it was the opposite. It was the opposite. My income, it's not like I was super rich, but I worked really hard as an engineer as well as a songwriter. And I had licensing and I have a band and my band would tour. And so I was able to put together a reasonably just middle-class living. And I haven't yet worked my way back up to having that. But at the same time, it's dicey being an artist and being self-employed because your money might come in larger chunks, but you have to stretch it out for a long time, and you may not know where the next one's going to come from. And the fact is that I have never done things I didn't want to, like written songs for people or I have never gone and tried to shake down work. I never had to do that. But like I can imagine that could be discouraging if you don't get it, or you might find yourself burning yourself out a little bit sometimes if you're working too much on material for other people that is not your own stuff.
Right.
So there's a danger that if I had continued, maybe that would have been in my future as a songwriter or whatever. But I don't. But that wasn't. It wasn't something. It was really a matter of passion for me. I was so passionate about mathematics that I was distracted by it, and I wanted to devote myself to it fully. And I did the same thing with music when I was a younger person. I was a philosophy student, and I couldn't focus on school because I was starting Elephant Six, and I was starting the Apples, and I couldn't get my head out from thinking about music and about the music scene.
So were you a mathematician first, and then music came second? Is that?
Oh, no. In fact, I failed algebra in high school. I liked math as a kid. I liked it. I wasn't great at it, and I never took a math class in college or saw it as an interest for me. I think that I got into math when I was in my late 20s because I had to fix a tape machine in my studio, and I had to learn just a little bit of math to do that, and it just blew my mind. It blew my mind that mathematics was connected to my religion, which was music. And it supported it. It supported my studio and my band and my friends and my hobbies, and it wrapped me together with other people, like in my band or at shows. The mathematics controls all of the phenomena, the electricity and the musical structures of our songs. And so it sort of just blew my mind, and the mathematics felt really cosmic. And you have to understand, I love playing in a band, but I'm not a performer. Band practice is my favorite part. Going and playing in front of an audience is amazing. It's an amazing high to connect with a lot of people like that, but it's not my goal. My goal is not to be on a stage or to be looked at, and my goal is not to amuse other people. My goal is to have an authentic experience and to share it one-on-one with others. And I do feel like I have that when I'm playing shows, but I feel like I have it just as much when I'm playing for little kids or for my bandmates in a band practice, and that's a much easier scenario to get yourself into. Right. And so for me personally, I love to play music, but the physical act of playing it isn't the main thing I'm into, and certainly the performance of it publicly is the least important part for me.
So are there aspects then that you really, really miss, or no?
So I do. The thing that I love about music is that I always, from the time I was a small child, I always did it with my best friends. I always did it with my friends or with their friends or with their friends' friends. That's what Elephant Six became in my production career. And so I was always surrounded by friends. And so my music life and my social life were intertwined. And when your social life goes up and down, that can affect your music life a little bit. But really, my social life didn't go up and down that much. So I was lucky to have a pretty a happy and positive creative life in music in that way. However, as it became more demanding and our band became more popular and we became a headlining band instead of an opening band, it became less appealing to me personally. Not being a musician or doing music, but the touring aspect of it and the performing aspect became less appealing to me because it was more regimented. I liked showing up for a show right in before we played as an opening band, loading out of the van onto stage, you play, you load back out, nobody gives a fuck about you, you could leave if you want to. You may not even get paid and you don't have to stick around to wait to see if you're going to get paid because you probably won't. And that was freedom, sleeping on people's couches and maybe you can make enough money for gas, and it was freedom. And so I really loved that. And as we became more regimented in having to make it to shows early and stay there late at the end of the night, and you're spending your whole day kind of around a theater where I don't normally hang out in bars. There's nothing that wore on it. It's just it went from feeling like just a reckless vacation, which is what I feel like music is for me, to feeling like it was more professional. It wasn't professional. The Apples and Elephant Six were never fully professional, but it was more like that. And so it was easy for something like math to leak in and to steal my attention a little bit because it was useless. It was something that I couldn't. Nobody else related to it, and nobody else wanted it from me. Everybody would rather if I didn't do it. And so so there was something appealing about that to me, to have this thread in my life that was recklessly anti-professional as my previously recklessly anti-professional thing. Because remember, we completely worked around the music industry with Elephant Six, trying to do our own thing and to have our own sub-micro industry that would exclude the squares completely. Right. And this is the kind of thing that I've done. I've had the good fortune to be able to do something like this a few times in my life in different genres. For me, the most important part of making music was friendship. I got into it when I was a little kid, and I started to make friends. Really, I didn't have a lot of friends. I was significantly unpopular as a child, being an immigrant and just being really, really, really weird. And so, by everybody else's description. And so people suddenly were able to make sense of me when I did music. They were like, "Oh, I see now. That makes sense. I see what you are." And people start. And so it has always been the thing that appeared to other people to be a function that I have in the world. So as a young person, for me, making music was both something that I felt was my purpose in a way that I don't know if most people feel that they have a purpose like that, but I had no other purpose. I had no other gratification and no other support from society. And so it really felt like a purpose to me. And it felt like a purpose because I was able to resonate with other people and to help them and to help my friends also who made music. And this is something that's always driven me, and it still drives me. And so for me, my musical life has been centered around my friends and around a particular group of friends. And they're the same people that I'm still friends with, and they're the same people I still care about their musical growth, and I still care about their lives, and I still support them, and I'm still interested and I still collaborate with them. So I'm still, that's the things that for me, my musical life was centered around friendship. It was centered around like amateurism as an aesthetic.
Almost like the plays inside the movies that Wes Anderson makes.
Yes, that's actually, I really relate to those little plays.
Yeah, sure.
And I love his
movies.
I love his movies. He's my favorite filmmaker.
Have you thought about linking up with Will and doing
Will
something?
and I, like we recorded a single a few years ago, and we're still friends. I just showed him when I was in Athens recently, I showed him how to use AI music.
Nice.
And we talked about like dumping music to 4 tracks and doing experimental music. And he and I are best friends. And we did a single a few years ago, I'll send it to you, with our band called The Patient. It was a band we have with Scott Baxendale, who is an Athens musician, a Denver and Athens musician, actually. He, like me. Oh, but what I was saying is that, so for me, the aspect of music that is about a group of friends, and also the aspect of sharing with a large audience, or with any audience, not large, but with an audience where you're looking at people and sharing, or with an audience through that are listening to your recordings. It's a very special and personal thing. It feels like hugs. It feels like whispering in each other's ears. You know, it feels like personal to me. And like, that doesn't exist for me in mathematics, but it only doesn't exist for me in mathematics because my social scene is musicians, and it exists for me in my social scene of the friends that I have and their friends and their children. You know, like the people that I love and I care about are also the people that I've done music with. And so my mathematical scene is different from that, but my mathematical scene is equally beautiful and equally personal in a different way. Yeah. On the side of just doing research, though, so this is what I wanted to say. As a musician, playing music, playing for an audience, having band practices, this is less important to me. I'm somebody who is a composer, I'm a producer, I hear music in my head all the time, I hallucinate it, and I want to reproduce it sometimes on tape or on the computer. And for me, the most personal and the most beautiful part of that experience is the internal part of listening to the music internally. The manifesting it and bringing it into being feels more like a mission and a task. I have a beautiful inner music playing all the time, and I love to listen to it. And it makes me feel peaceful and happy and comforted. Yeah. And so that's why I like AI music when I can make good AI music, is it replicates the feeling of music that comes from nowhere.
Right.
And,
right.
You know, and so to me, it's a very beautiful thing in principle, is that, you know, in any event, mathematics feels like that. I'm in the same exact space, no different. I'm in the same space as when I'm hearing productions and arrangements and songs develop in my head. And I'm feeling theorems develop in my head. I'm in the same space of creativity, and it's just as unique and personal and also innovative as the space of music that I dwell in. And it feels like it's the same canvas in my mind. It's that the audience is different. The audience is like, it's like being a poet. Being a mathematician is like being a poet, except for that your poetry lasts for thousands of years. It lasts forever. You discover something and you write it down and it lasts forever. The thing you've written down is true. You're speaking to a small community of other people that are able to read your words. A poet in the modern era, because poetry used to be a major form of popular literature. But in the modern era, a poet is somebody that is deeply processing their experience of reality and putting it succinctly into words in a terse format that other people can decode. And there's a lot in there for them to decode. A poem has a lot. It's a book. It's a book's worth of emotion and ideas. And yet, in the modern era, poetry is an obscure enough art form that really the main people that read it are other poets. It's not that other people aren't capable of reading it with just a little bit of extra work, but to have the full context, to be able to fully understand modern poetry, a poet, at least a poet, has that. And that's the way I always felt about our music scene with Elephant Six, was, well, maybe the world won't understand it, but at least other musicians will understand it.
The full force of how people connect with it. I mean, the Facebook group, Elephant Six Enthusiasts, there's a lot of Facebook groups out there that kind of, you know, float along with not much activity. Yours, and I know it's not your group, somebody else set it up, right?
Yes, it's no, I don't manage it, but I am a member of it. But it's a very active group, and it has, you might notice, it has its own music scene within the group. It has its own music scene and of new music, and it also has, and it grew out of the Elephant Six Town Hall, which was a long-standing chat list from the 1990s up until basically Facebook started.
I didn't know.
And the Elephant Six Town Hall, it also had its own music scene within it. So, and in fact, it's something that I love about Elephant Six. It exists in the public. It's not something that it doesn't exist in our collective. In a sense, our collective exists in the public. Our audience and our members of the collective are sort of unified. Yeah. And they have been like that since the 1990s. It's
and
always
not
been
only
the case.
that, but your contributions to the group are consistent to the point where you are just about the most approachable rock star, and I'm putting quotes there,
yes.
has ever lived. I mean, you know, you're knocking down the stage height to a couple inches tall.
You know what? That's literally the stage height should be floor level, and those are the best shows. Is when you're playing in somebody's kitchen on the floor level with your audience.
Right.
I agree with you. Thank you very much. It's very kind that you think those things of me. Thank you very, very much.
Well, it's true.
I think there's thank you. In mathematics, also there are collaborations. Thank you so much. It's very, very moving that you think that. In mathematics, there are deep collaborations, and you're getting really deep into stuff, and that's similar to writing songs or producing with somebody else, where you're getting really, really, really deeply into a headspace that nobody else is into until you come out of it. It feels on the internal sense, it's not unlike music. Being with mathematicians is different. They have different personality types, and I tend to hang out with musicians. It's just that that's who I meet. We can spot each other from the way we look, and so I tend to hang out with musicians, and I don't know why that is. But my friends here are musicians at my college as well, and I have a math and music lab that I work in, and I don't know why that is.
I need to ask you a question,
and that's a little bit different.
This question's been nipping at me since we started here. Oh, hi. I'm Dave Gebrow. I threw my career as a licensed hearing instrument specialist in the trash, sold my house, and moved to the East Coast with my wife and 5-year-old son in order to focus on making the ultimate weekly podcast for music obsessives thrive. But weekly wasn't enough for me, so I bumped it up to 4 shows a week. Becoming a subscriber to Discograffiti's Patreon gives you access to hundreds of exclusive episodes. As a 2-show per week private, you get the weekly show by and for our Patreon family, the Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound podcast. As a 3-show-a-week lieutenant, you'll get early release, ad-free, extended director's cuts of the main show. They're the shows as they were intended to be heard. Plus, you'll gain access to half the Patreon archive and the upcoming Beach Boys Behind the Mirror companion episodes, which will feature dozens of special guests from within the Beach Boys camp talking about and rating their music. But as a 4-show-per-week major, you'll be drowning in a flood of must-hear binge listening, because I'll be bombarding you with episodes about super cool bands that are too subterranean for free Fridays. It's like going to music college, but with a tuition that makes all kinds of sense. Plus, our entire Patreon archive is yours. Discograffiti's Top 10, our Buried Treasure show, Rock Cousteau, our Slag Off show, Queasy Listening, and the Private Press with Paul Major. And all that for the price of only a cup of coffee a week. Times are tough, you say? Fret not, because there's a $1 tier. Or you could just join as a basic member and buy episodes piecemeal from our Patreon shop. Don't risk feeling badly about yourself by not giving. Check out patreon.com/discograffiti to find the tier that's right for you. Once again, that's patreon.com/discograffiti. This question's been nipping at me since we started here. Is what drew you to math the idea of the cleanliness of an equation and the consistency of mathematical results as opposed to the emotional vagueness of music? I mean, the fact that you can... an equation
that's a very good question. Okay.
Is there an element of
very good
control or reliability in an equation that's appeasing to you?
Okay. Now, that is true about equations, and that exact stability is what gives us things like computers and our musical equipment and these things. And it's very comforting about mathematics, that it gives us these practical effects. So that is very nice about it. But you're also capable of being completely creative and striking out in your own direction, kind of like experimental music with mathematics. And that's sort of what I like to do more. And also, once music is recorded and interpreted, there's not at that point it's kind of like a proof of concept. It's not a question anymore.
Right.
So in a sense, there is something like a finished song that is like a theorem in math. This is the example. I proved it. I proved my idea can be brought into the world. You know, and oftentimes a whole band will serve as a theorem, like Television or Sly and the Family Stone. It's not just a bunch of great songs. It's a new style.
Right.
That's an idea that you've introduced a new idea through the style of your music. And I think that that's real similar to introducing new ideas in mathematics. There are a lot of overlaps because mathematics is not a science. It doesn't depend on the scientific method. It's an art form. And it is true, like art is true. It's true in the internal sense. You hear a poem or you see an artwork, and whether you like it or not is not a subject to argument. There's a truth to it that is instantaneous, or even if it takes time to sink in, there's a level of truth to your experience of art. It's not of a factual kind. It's deeper than that. that we process our facts by that same aesthetic. Does this hit me well or not? That's why we process facts.
Does it bug you during a long division problem when there's a remainder?
Ooh, actually, that's very interesting because that's what the entire field of modular arithmetic in number theory comes from. So it doesn't bug me. It's actually probably one of the more beautiful things that I think about.
Interesting. Okay, there's something about the cleanliness of a long division problem where there's no remainder that makes me feel still inside. Whereas, for example, if you're drawing, let's say, an 89-degree angle, it'll make me want to rip my hair out.
Yes. Everything. Okay, look. Everything you're saying is right because arithmetic's hard, division's hard, and big numbers are scary. I just try not to think about those things too much. Or when I think about them, I have to think about them really hard. Okay. But mathematics has a very beautiful sense of composition to it, and so it feels like composing music. If you imagine what like a classical composer might feel. It feels like that. It's the internal sense of that. The thing that's different about the audience, where you don't get a similar thing from an audience, but mathematics has something different because the job of a mathematician, once you've gained these deep skills, it's very rarefied. Not many people have them, and it becomes almost like a duty to teach others. Plus, as a research mathematician, I've gained my own perspective and my own set of theorems that I've developed, my own theory. I've developed a theory. And so there's also like a sense of wanting to share that with students and with others, not just through my writings, but directly one-on-one. And so having graduate students, which is a new experience for me, I'm in my third year as a professor who can have graduate students, is a very deep experience to work with advanced mathematics students as collaborators, and also teaching classes in mathematics and trying to express these beautiful ideas to people who are anywhere from enthusiastic to wishing they weren't in the room. For younger students is very nice. Both universities I've taught at tend to put me in front of larger classes because I tend to handle those well. I'm not intimidated by it because I guess I've played for thousands of people. And so I handle a large group of students just the same as a small group, and it's just as easy for me. And so I think that there's a very, very beautiful personal connection in teaching that's different. It's more like the connection that you have one-on-one with a listener in music, where I have the feeling when I write a song and I record it, I know that there's one other person that will hear it and that will understand me. And when somebody comes up and tells me that they do, then I really feel that that's the person. I usually hug them. And so I feel like I'm sending a direct message out in music, not to the world or to society or to try to make it, but I'm sending a message out to another person, maybe like me, if such a person exists.
Do you feel like you're going to be cracking open the book where you left off with Apples in Stereo? Do you feel like there's more to say as that iteration of yourself that you not abandoned, but decided to reshift focus away from?
I morphed into mathematics from music because I was following my interest. It was a reasonably impractical decision. Nobody around me wanted me to make it. My bandmates didn't want to stop touring and recording. My records were at their peak of I was making my most popular records. And so I didn't have a worldly reason to quit. The reason was an internal, the same reason that I quit school to be a musician when I was young. It was an internal feeling such that I couldn't override it and do anything else. I'm driven in that way. And I'm uncontrollable. I really am. I think the people that know me know that about me. I'm uncontrollable. They can't control me and I can't control myself. And I haven't had enough negative reinforcement in my life to force me to. And so, and which makes me a very, very, very habitually bad person in a lot of ways. Like I'm super messy, bad with time, late, hard to schedule, don't check email very often, but the fact is that I'm earnest. I'm earnest and I have flaws, but I'm uncontrollable and I'm trying to rein it in. Give me another 50 years and perhaps I can.
Are you going back? Are you going to go back to Apples?
Well, okay. So yeah, I'm getting to that. And so I got into mathematics for that reason. However, very surprisingly, I was accepted into graduate school after completing college, after dropping out of music. Is very surprising because math graduate school is hard to get into, and it's hard for people to get into math. So to get into math graduate school, it's among the least possible things that one could do at any time because you have to get into math first. And you have to get that deeply into it to get into math graduate school. I mean, come on, like who does it? I mean, I know a lot of people that do it. They're my students and my friends, but each one of them is very special and taking a significant leap in their lives. But at the same time, the very weekend that I moved to math graduate school, I chose to go to graduate school in Atlanta at Emory University because there was a mathematician there, Ken Ono, that was magical. When I met him, I vibed with him like almost no other human being on earth. I needed to follow him. And so moving to Atlanta was for me at least a way that while I was dropping out of music, I was still moving actually closer to my music scene. I could still participate, I could still see my friends, and I was going to work with the Olivia Tremor Control on their new album. And this was my plan as I was moving to Atlanta. I had a new music future that was different from my past one. But my best friend passed away that same weekend. Bill Doss passed away the same weekend I moved to Atlanta to start graduate school.
Oh, my God.
The next day after we moved. And I can't tell you the trauma and the loss, the sense of loss that I feel from that is like unending. But there was also a practical consequence for me because he was my first collaborator and my longest collaborator and my most steady collaborator, and at that time, my current collaborator. And so I also lost really the person that motivated me to do music from the start. And I just loved him so much, and I wanted to impress him. He was older than me. He was like my big brother, and I just lost that. I lost that. He was my best friend, and he was my closest musical collaborator. We recorded our first songs together. I loved him. And I had already made the decision to move away from music. And psychologically, the trauma from him passing away was so great for me that it made it impossible for me to look backwards. And I stopped identifying as a musician. My musical person had gone. My identity. Bill was part of my identity. From my friendships is a really big part of my musical life, and he was a part of my identity. And I lost that as a musician. And I only identified as a mathematician suddenly, having gone into graduate school. And it took some years, maybe up until just a few years ago, that I started to kind of remember myself as a musician and remember my passion.
How long between his passing and you identifying as a mathematician?
Instantly. That day,
oh, really?
I think I started graduate school the same day that I found out he passed away. I had to go into school that day.
Okay.
In addition to having to deal with this terrible event in our lives and in my life and in his family and my family, it also logistically and psychologically switched me over. And so I've still been going through a period since then where I'm kind of like, I don't know if I'll heal, but I'm morphing back into being something of both a musician and a mathematician. Mm-hmm. The mathematician's my job. The musician is my hobby that I do for free for the community.
Right.
That's kind of how I see it. So as far as the Apples go, at this stage, I write a lot of songs, but I mainly write them privately, or if I want to release them, I don't have time to record them. So I think that recording is the hardest thing for me now. It's the hardest for me to come back to. My first recording was with Bill, and it's just hard for me to come back to. I don't know why it is. It's just hard. It's hard for me to actually do it. I recorded one song in the last 2 years, and my son recorded it for me because he needed a project for a recording class he was in. So he asked me if I had any songs, and I wrote a song for him, and he did a really beautiful recording of it. But it was like I didn't, he did it, and it's really, really nice too. And the Apples was something where you don't understand how much effort I put into that. I mean, like, to take 2 years working every day, all day long on an album of that density of production. Like, if you listen into those records, and you're hearing a lot of time. So I'd love to play with the Apples again. And another thing is that my interest has shifted to mostly making experimental music now. That's where I have a passion, like where I feel like I'm saying something new and something that's different for me and exciting, is making experimental music as sort of a mathematician composer. Experimenting in that way, I think that the next Apples album would be highly experimental, and and actually I've been planning for about 10 years a very experimental album that I had mapped out back in graduate school, and it has very, very deep storylines. But then it's so deep it would take me like 2 years to record it, and then I don't have the time. So it probably has to wait till I'm in my 60s. So I think that I think there's there may be an Apples album in the future, but I don't think that we're going in the same way the Strawberry Alarm Clock are still going. I don't think that the Apples as the original garage band are. I'm not sure though. I can't say this because they're still my best friends. The Strawberry Alarm Clock maybe didn't think that when they dropped out for this or that reason from the band. So it's hard to say. In fact, I want to say the Strawberry Alarm Clock. Actually, the Strawberry Alarm Clock and hearing their story and discussing it with you actually gives me hope, or not hope, but actually a hint that there could be another chapter for the Apples in stereo, because we are still friends and we are still young and we are still bursting with creativity, and who knows where we will channel it in the future. The Strawberry Alarm Clock didn't know, and right. So I think that when I see their example, the first band that turned me on to psychedelic music, I think that I can draw some sense from them that maybe there is more for the Apples in stereo, and just from my perspective today, I can't see into the future to know what it will be.
I'm curious, we kind of expounded on the idea that the Strawberry Alarm Clock didn't really get to achieve what they set out to achieve, which is to follow up that number one hit with another success. So they were chasing their own tails, and that's why they're still together, because they went down with defeat when they broke up in 71. Did you achieve what you set out to achieve with the Apples in stereo? This episode is brought to you in part by Bespoke LA. Located in the Fairfax district of Los Angeles, Bespoke LA is the modern podcaster's dream come true. It's got 2 podcast pods available, one with audio only and the other with both audio and video. Just think, you can start your own podcast tomorrow without investing a single penny in equipment. What, you don't have experience editing? Don't even sweat it. For an additional fee, Bespoke LA can edit your podcast. Or not, it's entirely up to you. Rates start at $75 an hour with discounts if you book 4 sessions at once. Go to bespokela.com/podcast. That's BSPOKELA.com/podcast for more information or to book your time today. And be sure to tell them that Dave sent you for a one-time 25% discount. Did you achieve what you set out to achieve with the Apples in Stereo?
I achieved that with our first album.
Right.
more with our first album. I achieved so much more with the Apples in Stereo that I could have dreamed. Well, not with our singles, I suppose, but with Fun Trick Noisemaker. Okay. And beyond that, and certainly with New Magnetic Wonder.
You know what turned me on to you was Running in Circles. That riff.
Thank you. It's one of my favorite songs I wrote.
That riff in the beginning is so beautiful.
Thank you. Oh my gosh. Okay, dude, I'm going to send you I wrote the bass line for that was a bass line. I wrote it as originally as one of Bill's early demos. I played bass on it. I wrote that bass line for it. And when I had an Apple song that had a similar chord progression, I recycled the bass line.
That's great. That's great.
So at some point, I'll send you the Bill song, totally privately though. But cool. I'll share it with you. I'll play it for you anyway. I'll play you the song by Bill so you can hear the song from high school that we recorded that resembles that.
That's great. Thank you.
And thank you for thinking that. I love that song. I'm really proud of it.
Cool.
I think that in New Magnetic Wonder, I did musically achieve everything I had ever thought to set out up until that time, including up to that time. And with Travelers in Space and Time, I had always been into R&B, and I was into yacht rock and these other genres, and I was in a headspace with John Ferguson, my other close collaborator and my close friend and my bandmate in the Apples. We had gotten into a very, very, very strong headspace of listening to smooth music and also being into kind of like futurism. And I had this vision of the future of like music, that it would be this kind of UFO R&B, which it actually turned out to be what the music of the 2010s was like. And so that album, we were trying to do something new because there was a theme in the Apples, which was science fiction that we had always had in our lyrics. It was like UFOs and rockets and science fiction.
Seems so.
That seems so, exactly. And that we hadn't ever manifested into a full album. And so Travelers in Space and Time was taking that last thread, the apples of Hillary, the apples of Elephant Six, was completed in New Magnetic Wonder. And yet there was still more. There was still the science fiction pointing into the future. And so John Ferguson and I with our band, we made that album. And with Bill also was heavily involved in it. And that album was a concept album that I had at the time felt like it might be the last Apples album. And it's pointing into the future as if it were the last Apples album.
What is the best Apples album?
So I don't know if I'd want to follow up on that with another one also, you know?
What's the best one?
I don't know if I'd want to follow up on that.
I know my favorite one.
Okay. I would have to say that Fun Trick Noisemaker is I would think it has to be the most classic one because it was the first Elephant Six album. And it defined my vision as a producer that I then manifested throughout all of our entire collective. And also defined my vision as a home recordist that I tried to manifest through my generation. And you know, so like this was something that I think that it's got to be the most important of our albums. But New Magnetic Wonder is by far the best one. It has everything the Apples ever wanted to do, from the lowest Phi to the highest Phi, like energy, all on one album. It's a concept album, which was something that was all of our albums were, but it's a strongly concept album. It was like a quadruple, it was like a double album, which is a very psychedelic thing to do. And it had all of my friends on it. It had all my friends. I got all of them in the room.
My favorite one for a long time has been The Discovery of a World Inside the Moon.
Now that was my masterpiece of my own personal production and engineering. I had a 16-track 2-inch tape machine in my studio, and I was at the peak of my engineering capabilities, and I never got there again. That was the best album that I produced personally. I engineered it personally, and it was and that was the peak of my powers. And it almost burned me out because I had to learn so much math to keep my tape machine, my 16-track in order, that it almost burned me out on high fidelity. Because after that, I started to do lower Phi or work with other engineers. So, thank you for thinking so. I'm very proud of that album.
You know, the funny thing is, you're talking about the sound, and when I think of that record, the first thing that comes to mind is not the sonics, it's the songwriting.
Thank you for thinking that. Okay, because being a producer and engineer is part of my path as a musician and songwriter, they're all wrapped up together, so I hear all these things together. I'm really glad you think so. I'm really proud of all of the songs on that album.
Very moving stuff on there.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's actually a wistful album.
Yeah, it is.
And although there's some angry songs like Go. Too. Thank you so much, David. Thank you.
No, thank you. Are you kidding me? I've listened to that album so many times.
Can we do another Discograffiti sometime on either Wendy Carlos or on anything else?
I don't know if I'm the guy to talk about Wendy Carlos.
I know, that's why I was thinking we could do it on another band that we have common love of. Or I could do the Apples like you originally asked me to do.
You want to do the Apples?
In the future, I'll do the Apples if you're interested.
Of course, but I mean, I
just wanted to make sure I got my favorite band in.
Yeah. Look, I would love to. Whenever you want to do it again, I would love to. I mean, I would love to wake up every day knowing I get to talk with you about music.
You're so sweet. Thank you. And I would love that too. And I want you to know that I really feel for you and I want to talk more. And please stay in touch with me about your journey as your son is going to kindergarten.
I will.
And please know that I'm here for you. Our conversation doesn't end with this episode. Definitely. I've loved spending time with you. Thank you, Dave.
I love you.
I love you. Here, I'm giving you a big hug on my computer. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I loved this, and it's such a great show. Thank you.
Me too. Thank you. All right, that about does it. If you enjoyed this episode, please Venmo Gebro. I repeat, Venmo Gebro at David-Gebro, Gebroe. Please keep in mind this is entirely how I support my wife and my 5-year-old son, so don't risk feeling badly about yourself by not giving. Venmo me a tip at David-Gebro. Stay tuned, because we're kicking in the new year next week with an astounding interview with Pete Best from the Beatles, in which we find out what it's like to try and learn how to live a normal life as your former band winds up redefining the culture around you. I know I've been threatening it for some time, but this time, it's for real. I am not fucking around in 2025. Okay, here's the week up ahead. This Sunday, our weekly show within a show, the Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound podcast, drops for our Patreon's private tier. These are real people with talent and a burning fire deep inside, just like you and I. Then come Monday, it's the Pete Best story, Discograffiti's fascinating biographical prelude that tells the story of the former Beatles' life, so you get maximal enjoyment out of our incredible upcoming interview. Come Monday, you'll get a sense of how crushing it can be to find out your band's finally hit number 1 while you're loading bread onto the back of a delivery truck. You are not going to want to miss this. And then on Wednesday, the Lieutenant tier get their early release, ad-free, super extended director's cut of the Pete Best Discograffiti interview. And then come Friday, the rest of you penny pinchers get to join in on the action. A heartfelt Discograffiti thanks goes out to my beautiful wife and son, Jen and Mason, Robert Schneider, Rudy Fishman, Becky Boyd, Jay Schultz, Cream, Bespoke LA, my mom, my dad, my incredibly loyal fans, and especially the entire Patreon community, the Soldiers of Sound. I love every last one of you, and this show would not exist without you, my friends. Speaking of friends, it's high time for some new ones. They're in our Facebook group, Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound. That's the best way to find out what's coming up on the show, but there's a hell of a lot more. You get recaps of the day in music history, the ability to pitch questions to guests, polls that put you in the driver's seat on guest and band decisions, access to a thriving creative hub if you're looking for a collaborator, and much, much more. So make sure you don't miss out. You can find the link to the Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound Facebook page right there in the show notes. And if you don't mess with the Zuck, no sweat. Just email me at info@discograffiti.com and I'll keep you in the loop. So now that it's done and you want more, another way to dive even deeper into the wonderful world of indie pop is to leap head first into my interview with Kula Shaker about the albums that shaped them. That's episode 139. The 4-part Mark Robinson series, that's 128, 130, 135, and 136. The incredible 3-part historic Will Cullen Hart Olivia Tremor Control series, that's 131 to 133. Vashti Bunyan rating her entire catalog, that's 103 and 104. An interview with Foxygen's Jonathan Rado, that's 75. Rado rates Rundgren, that's 37 and 40. Unquestionably the greatest Lou Barlow interview of all time, that's number 62. Lou rates the Zombies, that's 59 and 60. Anthony Fantano rates the Velvet Underground, that's 32 and 33. Jen Pelly rates the Raincoats, that's 15. And Cocteau Twins is number 3. And of course, be sure to mark your calendars, because next Friday, January 3rd, 2025, we're coming at you with an interview with Pete Best from the motherfucking Beatles, because that's the kind of year it's going to be. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss it. And so, from now till then, don't let our youth go to waste, lads and ladies. It's Discograffiti!